Hi everyone, welcome back to Hands-Free Studying for the MBE, brought to you by Brainscape. These upcoming torts questions cover strict liability and products liability. All right, let's get started. Question 1. Strict liability is only imposed in which three scenarios? Strict liability is imposed in scenarios involving abnormally dangerous activities, wild animals, and defective products. All right, question 2. What type of duty does a defendant have in strict liability situations? The defendant has a duty to make the activities absolutely safe. The defendant will be liable for the plaintiff's injuries even if the defendant was not negligent. Question 3. What are the elements needed to establish a prima facie case for strict liability? First, you need to show that the defendant's activities imposed an absolute duty to make them safe. 2, that there was a breach of duty. 3, there was actual cause. 4, there was proximate cause. And 5, there were damages. Question 4. When is a defendant strictly liable for injuries resulting from a wild animal? The defendant will be strictly liable when the plaintiff's injuries are unprovoked and caused by the animal's foreseeable dangerous propensities or characteristics. Now, note, the defendant will only be liable for injuries caused by the animal's dangerous propensities. If the defendant owned a lion, for example, and the plaintiff is injured because she's allergic to the lion's hair, the defendant will not be liable because it's unrelated to the lion's dangerous propensities. Question 5. What is considered a wild animal? Wild animals are considered animals that are, as a matter of common knowledge, are naturally ferocious, unpredictable, dangerous, mischievous, or not by custom devoted to the service of mankind where they are kept. Let's take a quick study break to remind you that it's really important to sit up straight. Good posture improves your attention span and memory, not to mention prevents back problems. So let's sit up a little bit straighter and go through questions 6 through 10. Question 6. Are defendants liable to undiscovered trespassers for injuries from their wild animals? No, defendants do not owe a duty to undiscovered trespassers for injuries from a wild animal, but they may be liable for injuries from a vicious watchdog. Question 7. Is a defendant strictly liable for injuries caused by domesticated pets? Generally, no. The defendant will only be liable for negligence. However, if the defendant knows or should know of the animal's dangerous propensity, and the plaintiff's harm is caused by that dangerous propensity, then the defendant can be held strictly liable. Question 8. Is a defendant strictly liable for harm caused by his animal trespassing on another's land? Yes, the defendant can be strictly liable for reasonably foreseeable harm. There is an exception, however. The defendant will not be strictly liable for damage caused by household pets. Question 9. What is considered an abnormally dangerous activity? Abnormally dangerous activities are defined as activities that are not of common usage and that create a foreseeable and highly significant risk of physical harm, even when reasonable care is exercised. In other words, this activity is so dangerous that it cannot be performed safely no matter how much care the defendant exercises. Question 10. What are some examples of common abnormally dangerous activities? Some examples include blasting, mining, transporting toxic waste, fumigating, or using explosives. Remember, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some things that may come up on the MBE. And that's the end of your 10 flashcard study round. To reach full mastery, remember to study in Brainscape. Our mobile and web app uses the latest in spaced repetition techniques, allowing you to optimize your study time and track your progress down to the finest detail. Of course, when you're driving, cooking, exercising, or otherwise unable to navigate the app, be sure to keep listening to the rest of this hands-free studying playlist. No matter what subject you're learning and what method you're studying it, Brainscape helps you rise to your challenge.